Hey y'all, so we're thinking about issues related to assessment. And so I need you to start thinking about what you think the role of assessment is, what makes a good assessment, and then what teachers and policymakers and parents and everyone else should be aware of related to assessment. So in terms of classroom assessment, we're going to talk about it as including all of the processes involved in making decisions about students' learning progress. So we're not like just talking about standardized tests, for example. We're talking about lots of different ways in which folks can get information about a student's learning progress. In terms of types of assessment, I need you to think about formative assessments and summative assessments. So formative assessments are used before and during instruction to aid in planning and diagnostics. So I'm getting a sense of like, what is it that this person knows? How can I help along the way? It's like the process, like daily check-in kind of things. Those are formative assessments. Summative assessments follow instruction and allow you to assess achievement or knowledge, memory. As psychometricians, which is what you'll be as you're thinking about assessments, you're thinking about theta. So theta is talked about as the true score. So what your true ability is. I have a true ability in statistics, for example. We want to measure and what we want to do is get as close as possible to that true score. Theta has a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. Measurement error is the difference between theta and the measured score you get. So if my true score, let's just imagine, is let's put me right in the middle, right? Let's say I'm right in the middle in terms of my statistics knowledge. So my true score, my theta, is 0 because it's a mean of 0. And if my measured score, if we put it on a z-score, is it's like a 0.1, then that measurement error is the difference between theta and my measured score. In terms of thinking about assessments, folks use an RSVP approach. So R looks at reliability. So are the results of the assessment consistent no matter when we give it? So it's not like, oh, I was just having a bad morning or something like that. Is it standardized? So does it have a similar format, content, and procedure for all of the students? Is it valid? To get our V, is it measuring what we're actually intending to measure? So the whole idea of internal validity. And then is it practical? So is it fairly simple to use and only takes a small amount of time to administer and score? In terms of validity, we know that internal validity is the extent to which something is measuring what it's intending to measure. So you can think about it in terms of studies, or you can think about it in terms of assessments. How do you improve validity? The first way to do it is to start with test specifications. So if I'm going to create an assessment, I want to first be really specific of what is it that this assessment needs to cover. Then I make sure every piece is covered so that I am sure that, okay, I wanted people to be able to do something related to knowledge of memory models. Do I have a question related to that? And then developing a rubric or a scoring system so that you're able to make sure that that's what you're getting. An accuracy of a test, an assessment, depends on really carefully sampling the content and the skills. So if you've ever taken an assessment where you said like, oh my gosh, there was a heavy emphasis on this area in the course and not very much on this, then we'd say that that had relatively low validity. And this is the idea of a sampling principle, that assessments are only valuable to the extent that the sample supports conclusions about that larger domain. So what is it? Is it a fair representation of the broader area that you're interested in assessing? In terms of reliability, we know that internal reliability is, and well, and reliability in general, is looking at the extent to which something is consistent or repeatable. So you can think about this in terms of a psych study, or you can also think about it in terms of an assessment. In terms of increasing reliability, there's benefit in having several tasks related to each domain that you're really interested in, right? So that if I miss one question related to, I don't know, behaviorism, that's arguably not a good measure of like my knowledge of behaviorism in general. You want to define the task really clearly so that folks know what they're being asked to do. And related to that as well, you want clear criteria for evaluation. So you are grading, in effect, assessments the same way every time. And then administer the assessments in similar ways for everybody, and then minimize assessment bias. So in terms of assessment bias, here's an example of a multiple choice question that we could design. We could say, my uncle's field is computer programming. Look at the sentences below. In which sentence does the word field mean the same as it does in the sentence above? And the trick is that different folks, depending on their life experiences, will have an easier time with this question. So, for example, if you grew up in Walla Walla and hung out with wheat farmers, then you would know what field they're talking about in question B. And if you grew up nowhere near farmers, that would be harder for you to figure out, right? So those kind of issues. So assessment bias are any of the qualities of an assessment that are going to unfairly penalize a group of students. So we want to think about how to minimize that in terms of our assessments. You also want to think about what types of knowledge and skills you're targeting. On our Canvas page, I've asked you to read about Bloom's taxonomy. So it can be depicted as a set of stairs that students climb from one level to the next. You want to think about, in terms of designing an assessment, what level of Bloom's do you want to be at? Many folks say, I want to look at folks on multiple stair steps, but think about what it is you want to do. So that's our RSVP approach and a bit on Bloom's taxonomy. You need to read more about Bloom's taxonomy on Canvas. I want you to also think about criterion reference versus norm reference tests. So a criterion reference test is a mastery test. I'm going to say, this is what I want people to know. And so I'm going to assess their knowledge based on that set of objectives. So with the learning objective being the intended result of instruction. Related to all of this, the definition is going to be really key. So for example, if I, in this class, say, I have two criterias. I have two pieces related to performance that I'm interested in. I want folks to have a thorough understanding of Bloom's taxonomy. So I want people to be able to identify the different stair steps and give me examples from each one. And I want people to be able to understand the difference between criterion and norm reference tests. So then what I say is I'm going to figure out what my criteria are for that. So, I'll set my criteria. And then as long as people are able to pass meet those criteria, everyone in the class can get an A. So we're working against the criterion as opposed to against the group norm. That's what a criterion reference test does. If in comparison, or on the other hand, everyone in the class was like, I could not tell me anything about Bloom's taxonomy, couldn't tell me anything about the difference between criterion and norm reference tests, then on a criterion reference test, everyone gets an F. A norm reference test, in comparison, compares my performance to the performance of other people. So it's designed to yield a normal curve. So what ends up happening is that regardless of how many of the questions, in effect, I get right, what matters is how I do in comparison to other folks in the class. So if I don't get very many of the questions right, but no one else in the class does either, then I might be, at the mean or even in the top half over here, right? Okay, so let's imagine how this might work. You're in a calculus class and you score 47. Sorry, the dog is making noise in the background. You might say, if you're Mr. Jackson, you say, I'll do 15% A's, 30% B's, 30% C's, 15% D's, and 10% F's. So what I do is I calculate a Z-score in effect for every person. And so, this here, let's say the mean is a 38, then that gets us to the Z-score and then the standard scores. So if the mean is 38 and the standard deviation is 6, a score of a 47 is going to be at the 65th percentile, which is going to give me a B. If instead I score the same, but the mean is 47, then suddenly I have a C. If the mean is 38, but there's a smaller standard deviation, so there's more people clustered closer together, and I score a 47, then I'm in the 99th percentile. I just got an A. The trick is that if you're going to do a norm reference test, you need discriminating items, because if everyone gets an item right or everyone gets an item wrong, it doesn't help you in terms of differentiating between people. In class, I'll ask you to think about criterion and norm reference tests and what are benefits and drawbacks of each. And then we'll also talk about issues regarding objective testing and issues regarding multiple choice questions and essays and what you might want to think about as you're designing your own questions. I hope you all have a lovely, whatever time it is where you are, and I'll see you later.